Okay, so where we're up to at the moment, we have our dodgeball's been launched at high speed. We've got our, you know, the material changing, and you know you can see that the dodgeballs are kind of varying in predictability. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a particle effect to them. So you know, as they pass through that launch volume, we're going to get them to emit a particle. So to do that, we're going to quickly go to Photoshop, and I'm going to create a new document. So File and New. I'm going to, for now, just make it 128 by 128. I'm going to set the background to transparent and click OK. And I'm just going to create a nice simple particle within this space. You know, feel free to make like whatever you want at this point. I'm just going to make like a creepy looking skull. So I'll just take a little bit of time now. Make sure you're working with transparency rather than black and white. I suppose you can always go in and you could always switch out whatever your white is for transparency easily enough. So I'm just going to wrap this up. Shouldn't take another minute or two. Might even add like a little glow effect to make it look extra. We can obviously use things like emissive properties and things like that to change how they look in game. But for now, this should do. Just maybe make that look a little bit more gross. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Let's check that. Let's make sure it's standing out. Cool. So once I've got this particle, that I've created, the thing that I'm going to want to do is just save that out. So I'm going to save that as skull, nice and simple. Save it as a PNG. That way you can access it easily enough. So I'm going to just quickly navigate to where I saved it, which I believe is on the desktop. So I'm just going to grab that folder, have that folder available, sorry, that file available, and I'm just going to drag it to the side so I've got it visible when I open up Unreal. Oh, I've just realised I inverted the colour. Let me just switch that back. In fact, for now, I'm just going to leave that as it is, because I want to show you something when we get into Unreal, which might be useful to know. So I'm just going to click and drag this in, and initially, when you do it, it might. Oh, in fact, just in the kind of, for the sake of good practice, if you look in the content browser, I've created my own folder structure of everything in kind of nice, neat format. I've also kept it all separate from everything else within the content browser, so all of the default stuff and template stuff, I tend to try and keep these things separate just because it causes less complications. I tend to find, where things get lost in random networks of things, and if you want to get rid of some of the default stuff, then you end up deleting things that are in your it just gets complicated, so I like to keep them separate. So I'm just going to move back up to this Dodgeball content folder, the kind of overarching content folder, and I'm just going to click and drag this folder, this file in. Now, as I said before, you'll probably get like a no entry symbol for a second or two. Just be persistent with it, and it will eventually allow you to bring it in. Now, what we've got is this thing, essentially a texture. Now this is alright, but the problem is that we need to actually be able to do something with this. Now, they aren't actually by default set up. When you import a texture, you need to first create a material from it. So if I right click on this and click create material, that is essentially just creating a nice quick material for us to work with. Now you might have noticed when I was creating this, it had kind of like a pixely edge to it. I'm just going to quickly show you how to actually achieve that within UE4, because I know quite a few people, I mean, just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to quickly show you how to achieve that crisp edge if that's what you're looking for to get in a UE4. So if I go into my texture, get this kind of weird, kind of scary, I don't know, jiggly effect. But you'll also notice when I'm looking at this texture, it's just completely blurry and blotchy and gross. If I scroll down to, where are we? The option I'm looking for is filter. Let me just quickly search and remember where this is. So under texture, if I click on this little drop down here, it'll give me a bunch of extra options, and there's this option called filter. If I change that from default to nearest, that will retain all the crispness of the object. So I'm going to save that. The other thing you might want to do is, as I mentioned before, I changed this to pink to check what it looked like, you know, without it being as kind of sharp on the eyes. So if I want to change that back in Photoshop, I can just click and do that. Just save it again. Yep, so just do that, and then without having to worry about doing that whole process again, I can just click re-import and it'll update the texture, which is really, really useful. So what I'm going to do from here is just minimize this, just save all again, and you should see your material update as well. So I'm going to go into this material now, and you'll see that at the moment I've just got this kind of coloured ball, which isn't particularly useful to us. So what I'm going to do now is click and drag, the first thing I want to do is change the blend mode. So I'm going to change that from opaque to translucent. And where if I just quickly switch it back, you'll see that opacity isn't been accounted for when we're bringing in this object. That's why it's a solid material, and we're not seeing any of the details of the skull. So if I change that back to translucent, you'll see that it gives me a little node that says opacity on it. So if I click and drag that across, the alpha node, connect that across to opacity, you'll see now I've got this rather creepy looking skull stretched over a spear. If I want to view that in a way that's going to look similar to the particle in question, I can switch it to a plane. If you can't see it immediately, it's because you need to turn it 90 degrees, or turn it around so it's in view. And what I'm going to want to do right now is I want to make this object glow. So to do that, I'm just going to drag off another texture sample, and I'm just going to connect that into emissive. Now if I do that, it's going to give it a little bit of a glow, but I want it to really have like a kick to it. So to do that, I'm just going to drag off a multiply, and then just connect that across into there. Now the place that you can edit you've got your A value, which is the current the values of the texture sample, and then you've got your second component, which is what you can manipulate. So I'm going to set this to something like 3, and you should see that you get this nice kind of glowing texture now, which looks really cool. Okay, so I'm just going to apply that, and yeah, now we've got this really great glowing texture. So for now, I'm just going to wrap up this video, and then we're going to move into Cascade in the next video and talk about how to attach these things to actors, and maybe even go into the kind of final bit, which is talking about how we're going to implement a blueprint to toggle this on and off. So yeah, let's tune in for the next one.